Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Multilingual Global Websites. My name is Becky and I will be moderating this event. Attendees have the opportunity to place questions into the chat during the session. It is now my pleasure to introduce you to your speakers, Sandra Wendland and Brandon Walsh. Thank you for today. You may now begin.
Thank you, Becky. Hello, Brendan. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the kind introduction. As a digital marketer, you want your products and your services to appeal to people in multiple markets all over the world. You want buyers to spend time on your website and purchase your services and products. It's critical to provide compelling content in their native language. Our topic today is optimizing content on your global website. There are multilingual sites with multiple languages. E.g., you might have Italian on your website to target Italy. You might have French to target France. You might have Korean to target Korea. There are also multi-regional sites where you have French for Canada, French for France, French for West Africa. In today's session, I'd like to share some of our learnings on optimizing content for language.com. Now, I can imagine one of the things you might be doing on your computer right now is typing keywords in like Übersetzung or Traduction, and then noticing, Sandra, your site doesn't rank for these. Firstly, I'm on a journey, a continuous improvement journey, a content optimization journey, a data-driven journey. There are many areas that are still work in progress. Like other corporate websites, I'm in a real-life situation with limited resources and time. My goal here today is to encourage you to go on a continuous improvement journey with me for your global site. Take an iterative approach. Research and analyze, build strong pages, measure, and then repeat. Secondly, there's a search intent to consider. This is one really important aspect that I would like to discuss today with you. Let's start with one example. Consider this example. In a previous company, long before I worked for Linebridge, we translated a page all about copy editing services into Italian. The Italian page ranked well for elaborazione redazionale, which was the primary term the translators used to convey the concept of editing. But however, when I looked at my traffic, I got 0 organic search traffic for this page. And it turns out that my target audience, busy business managers, marketing managers, used the English term to search for providers, or revisione, and I was going for the wrong search intent. Just on this note, I wanted to ask Brendan, do you have a similar example?
Yeah, I mean, I could mention an example from our own content, which is the word transform, where we were going to use the word transform kind of as an umbrella term for our translation, transcreation, optimization services, but from a search intent perspective, it just didn't work. We found ourselves competing with the Hollywood franchise, which is not ideal. From an English language perspective, US content doesn't always work in UK or Canada or, other English markets. So if it's got anything to do with like taxation or expenses or anything like that, the topics are going to be treated very differently in English language markets, never mind in translated markets. So I think intent is something that needs to be researched, and you need to check manually, check whatever way you need to make sure that you're getting the right intent and that you're targeting with the right keywords.
Thank you very much. And I wanted to point to another chart that I found in my daily reading, and it points to the fact that 90% of all pages out there, all the business pages that are being built out there, do not get any organic search traffic. And one of the reasons that was listed is that you need to match your search intent with the audience you try to target, and you need to figure out what is the data saying. I showed this chart yesterday to Brendan, and he had a very different way of looking at it. And I thought maybe, Brendan, you could share how you would go about this if you see this chart for your data.
Well, this is an important view for me, like for anyone who's looking to go on a particularly on a translation journey or on a journey with regards to getting their website operational in multiple markets. So when I'm talking to a client, I ask them to go back to their source content, ask them to find out like what are the top 10% of pages that we can focus in on, that we can make sure that we optimize those and we focus their budget on that 10% rather than on, oh, let's try a small level of optimization on 100% of your pages, because obviously 100% of pages, just not enough of those pages are important. It's really focusing in, starting small. You don't have to even optimize the 10%. Start with 1 or 2 or 3% of pages and get moving. The important thing is to pick the high value pages, optimize those first, and move on.
So that's what I was saying earlier. Come up with an iterative approach, go on a continuous improvement journey. Moving on, in my daily reading again, I saw this article that came through, and it seems there is a misconception out there that if my site ranks well in English, this will pull through to other languages. And there was an exchange on Twitter with some Google representatives, and what the Google representative said here is every language needs its own signals to rank. So if you're doing well in one language, you will need signals also in all of your other language sites. You cannot rely on English to pull through to German or to pull through to Italian or Korean. You do need to optimize per language. So you need to consider content optimization for each of your markets. And similarly, you need to also consider content amplification and distribution. This needs to be on a regional level. But again, you need to consider how are you going to go about that? What is your strategy? What markets? What pages? What is the search intent? And leading on, I'd like to, jumped back. One moment. Okay, here we have the right slide. Just leading on from what I just said, I think it's really important when you're setting out on a global content journey to talk and to define your strategy. And Brendan, I know you feel very strongly on this topic, to look at it from a different point of view rather than cost, look at it an investment to reach regional markets. Can you explain more on this?
Yes, of course. I mean, I think it's important if you want to be successful in a new market, that you try and give that new market a little bit of the same love you gave your source market. So when you're starting out with your source content, the research you did, kind of the audience research, the competitor research, the keyword research, all of that really should be done in market, in that target market that you're going after. A translated page is not going to automatically be successful. I mean, quite apart from local signals, that's not the only thing to think about. I mean, I think you need to be targeting the right words in the right market, the right questions. People are going to have different concerns in different markets, so you need to make sure that your content is addressing those concerns.
Right. So what I put together is 5 tips on what I consider you should be looking at as you develop your global content. And first and foremost is take a data-driven approach. Identify and optimize pages that have high value. Invest in those where you think these are pages you'll get organic traffic based on data, based on research. And there might be other pages where, like FAQ pages where machine translation is definitely a way to go. Or there might be pages where, translation is enough, but there will be pages where you want to reach and perform better. And so my recommendation is invest in the research and the analysis up front. Take a small chunk of those pages. Again, looking back to the slide we had on the 10% pages that perform well, try to take those into your regional markets. Moving on, one of the important things is, besides developing high quality content, is check your technical SEO. Make sure there's nothing interfering or hindering your pages from showing in Google. And I have a question for you, Brendan. What is the most common technical issue on large multilingual corporate sites that you encounter?
Well, I suppose for me, this is an easy one. I mean, it's generally hreflang. So hreflang is an element of geo-targeting that, it's a tag that you use to tell Google all the various different language versions of each page and link to them within the source code. It can be tricky to get right, but I suppose it's one element of geo-targeting that we commonly see as an issue. But geo-targeting in general is something to kind of consider. I think a lot of people know, if my page is slow, I know that. If my page isn't mobile friendly, I know that. But geo-targeting is a different thing. You do need to kind of sit back and analyze it and make sure that you understand from an architectural perspective, are you set up correctly? Are your hreflang tags set up correctly? Does your language selection tool work as well as it could do from an international perspective? And finally, the localization, is the localization in place? I mean, even simple stuff like automating a level of localization into your titles and descriptions and things like that. All of those things will come together to make sure that the right pages land in the right market. And I think that's, not being your own competition is an important part of getting your international approach right.
Okay, thank you for that. That's a really important point. Moving on, one tip from my side is make sure that you write strong meta titles for your pages. Meta title tags matter. And if you've been following the SEO news recently, Google has started rewriting title tags in a big way this summer. And there's many people who are like, oh no, what's happening? But my message today is, you will write a better title tag than Google. If you go in and identify the main topic of the page, write a good summary, research the primary keywords, and make sure you're within those length limits. So it does pay to invest in writing those title tags that are conform with what, fitting with what Google requires. And that way you will avoid automatic title tags that you don't like by Google. So just keep in mind, the title tags are really important because they're part of that conversion. That's the first thing people will see of your brand in the search engine results pages. And invest in writing good title tags is my tip of the day there. And then moving on, let's focus on creating text that adds value and answers questions. Find a good provider that has a strong copy editing element in there, strong copy editing skills, and a solid research and optimization process. And consider a mix of translation, transcreation, and content ideation for your website content. As we said, you don't need to content ideate everything, but there's like many pages where it makes a lot of sense to invest more and create content in language. Brendan, what is your recommendation?
I mean, from this perspective, I think like, high value campaigns should have like high quality content. I think that mix is important. Not every piece of content needs the same level of love to make it successful, or to be as successful as you need it to be in a new market. As you say, some content doesn't need optimization because it's never really going to succeed from a search perspective. It's there for other reasons. But where content is expected to succeed from a search perspective, that's where you need to invest. So it's really to understand what content you have, what content needs to go through the various different pipes to make sure that your mix of content works as well in your target markets as it does in your source market.
Okay, this is what I had to share about building strong pages for your global content. As I said earlier, it's a journey, and what I recommend is taking a data-driven approach and follow, an iterative process. That's what we wanted to get across today, and research, build, measure, and then repeat and learn as you go what works best for your various markets. Brendan, any final words of advice for our listeners?
Well, I think if to embark on a journey from an international perspective, from a translation and investing in, different markets, it's important to make sure that everything is right from a base perspective. That your technology is right, that your source language is looking good, because otherwise you're just going to take, small issues and replicate them all over the place. Take small language issues and replicate them all over the place. So make sure the basics are good and solid initially. And then the other thing I would say is just track everything. Okay. Invest in a tracking tool. Make sure you're tracking your keywords. Make sure you're, doing your regular site audits. Make sure you're getting that level of feedback that will help you iterate and make, improvements every time you kind of go to market with a new page or a new campaign or whatever. Use the knowledge of the past to improve and make sure you work well in the future.
Well, with that, we're at the end of our session. Thank you very, very much for listening, and I'll hand over back to Becky.
Thanks. We did have some questions come in. I'm going to pull the first one up onto the screen for you. Any recommendations on how to figure out whether the English or local language term is used more often by the target audience?
I mean, I'm happy to address that, Sandra, if you wish.
Yes.
I mean, I think we have the tools, I mean, there are tools available which will tell you, directly, whether the English or the local language term is being used more often by the target audience. But I think what's important there as well is to make sure, if you decide you're going to use an English term on a non-English page, is that good for you? Are you going to be competing with yourself for that term? Is that term in common parlance, or is it just, maybe not? Or actually, if the person in that, let's say it's Germany, if the person in Germany is searching with an English term, do they expect a German page or an English page? So all of these things need to be taken into account before you can, give a real answer on that. And I think, the answer there is you need to research the term in detail and make sure that you do choose the right term and that you're not competing with yourself.
That's a great answer.
And here's the next one. How robust are local SEO functions internationally as compared to the US? Is the strategy similar to optimize local listings in Germany as it is in the US?
Well, I can start with that maybe as I spend a lot of time in non-English, and what I see in the tools, and Brendan, you can maybe help me there. But what I see in the tools is they tend to be English centric. They start in English, and then the further you go away, the less, you know, if you're looking at Japanese, you might have a lot less data in some of those very cool tools that you find nowadays. And then you might need to rely more on search engine results pages or secondary sites to find information about what are people asking, what are they searching for. Brendan, what would you say there?
Well, I think this feeds back into like what you were saying earlier in the deck, where you were talking about local signals. So making sure that the correct local signals are in place. So whether that is, well, I suppose there's a term we kind of use called global, which is, a global approach, a global approach, but with local implementation. So that's really about making sure that, if this comes down to, a bricks and mortar shop, well, then, you are going to need, you're going to need your Google My Business in place and make sure all your map entries are correct. You might want to promote those with, local content and things like that. So it is very similar. US is generally to the forefront of these strategies. These strategies evolve in the US. But the point is, the US is just a more mature market from an online perspective. All of these strategies that work in the US will work globally. Organizing that can be difficult. Organizing whatever local SEO for a single market can be difficult enough. Doing it for 40 markets can be complex. So it does work. It's just managing can be difficult.
All right.
Great, thank you both. And we'll do this last question as the last one of the day. I'll try to summarize it. Depending on translation tools, what is the guarantee of accuracy?
I think one of the problems you have, and one of the things we've been talking about, is not the guarantee of accuracy. It's actually the guarantee of intent, and that's what we're really seeing, or what we're talking about. Machine translation, automated translation can be highly accurate, to a very, significant degree. Now, obviously, from an online perspective, we'd recommend post-editing and optimization and that kind of thing. But, translation tools can be very accurate. But accurate translation, isn't necessarily accurate intent, translation of intent, if that makes sense.
Definitely, that's helpful, Brendan. And I'm going back on my word. I saw another helpful question come in, so I'm going to bring it up. Would you be able to share how your strategy changes as you start to add languages to your SEO strategy? How do you prioritize scalability?
That's a very good question, right? First of all, I would really look at the market that I'm planning to expand to, and try and again figure out what are key pages that I need in that market. Again, break it down into smaller chunks. What I would recommend. There's some great tools out there by Common Sense Advisory that help you when you're trying to decide which further languages, how you want to go about it. That's it's a great question. Brendan, what would you say?
I think the most important thing is to make sure you have the right team behind you. Whether that's the in-market resources to do your research and your content, translation or transcreation, to make sure obviously you're engaged with a company that can give you access to global markets rather than 3 or 4 markets and having to engage with multiple different vendors, for multiple different countries, and then have multiple different processes you have to implement. So I think, having a global partner, obviously, Lionbridge is a global partner, so I'm going to say that. But like having a global partner really does help you when it comes to scaling, you know. So if somebody hands us off, you know, a single page, it doesn't really make much difference, you know, from a timeline perspective, whether I'm delivering, you know, two versions, you know, two language versions of that or 20 language versions of that. We can turn it around in similar amounts of time.
Awesome, thank you. So we'll conclude the webinar for today. The chat will stay live if anyone has any additional questions for Sandra or Brendan, as well as the recording. And thank you both for your presentation today. It was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.